At 2:16 a.m. on the night of March 4, 1943, the operators of radar station Bremen picked up something that should not have been possible. A faint signal low to the ground, moving faster than anything their instruments had ever recorded. The dot flickered, vanished, then reappeared on a reverse course. Lieutenant Hans Meyer frowned at the screen, tapping the glass as if the ghostly trace might solidify into logic. For months, reports had described a mysterious British aircraft striking targets deep inside the Reich and vanishing before interceptors could even take off. They called it Der Geist, the Ghost. The officers laughed at the name at first. British propaganda, they said, another story to explain their own failures. But this night, the Ghost had a position, a heading, and a speed that made no sense. At 2:22 a.m., searchlights over the Ruhr clawed at the clouds. A formation of anti-aircraft batteries opened fire on the unseen intruder. Witnesses on the ground reported only a flicker of silver against the moonlight, a whisper instead of an engine roar, and then a burst of orange as one of the shells found its mark. A burning shape skimmed the treetops, trailing sparks like falling stars, before breaking apart in a field outside Kassel. By dawn, the wreckage was surrounded by Wehrmacht guards and the men who would soon dissect it, engineers from the Luftwaffe's Technical Inspection Command. They approached the smoldering debris, expecting the usual twisted aluminum of a bomber. Instead, the air smelled of burnt varnish and resin. The fuselage, half intact, revealed something that froze them in place: wood. Birch and balsa layers of it bonded together by a hard amber glue. No armor plating, no defensive guns, no thick riveted skin, just a shell of polished wood that had once flown faster than any fighter they could build. One of the engineers laughed aloud. "So this is the Ghost. They sent us furniture." Another joined in. "Perhaps next time the British will attack us with chairs." They were confident men trained in the gospel of steel, believing that victory belonged to those who forged harder, heavier, stronger. Colonel Dietrich of the Luftwaffe's research division ordered the wreck to be shipped to the Rechlin Testing Center. His report that morning dismissed it as an odd experiment, a curiosity unworthy of concern. Yet, even as he wrote, the night sky above Essen shimmered again with the soundless approach of more mosquitoes, guiding bomber streams with uncanny accuracy. The colonel had no idea that the fragile wooden wreck he had mocked would soon expose the secret that was rewriting the science of warfare, the mathematics of precision. The captured aircraft lay silent on the railway flat car rain, washing the ash from its wings. A mechanic touched the splintered edge and found it strangely smooth, as if it had been shaped by craftsmen, not machines. Somewhere in London, men and women were already building another one, gluing, sanding, painting, preparing the next Ghost to cross the channel. The engineers at Rechlin would open its body, weigh its fragments, and laugh again before realizing too late that what they held in their hands was not a toy at all, but a weapon built from knowledge, not from metal. By late spring of 1943, Luftwaffe intelligence officers had stopped laughing. Reports arrived daily from night fighter squadrons across Western Europe, all describing the same impossible encounters. Pilots scrambled to intercept a British intruder, tracked it briefly on radar, and then lost it again, as if it had melted into the sky. Searchlights swept empty clouds. Anti-aircraft crews fired blind into darkness. The mystery aircraft struck airfields, power stations, even Gestapo offices, and vanished before pursuit planes could climb to altitude. Crews began whispering that the British had built a phantom machine. To calm them, headquarters issued a bulletin blaming equipment errors and pilot nerves. But the word spreading through mess halls said, otherwise there was something out there faster than sound, lighter than air, a wooden ghost that couldn't be caught. Luftwaffe engineers at Rechlin, still examining the burned wreck from Kassel, tried to prove it was a fluke. Their calculations insisted a wooden airframe could never survive the stress of 400 miles per hour. Yet every week new bombing photographs reached Berlin, razor-sharp images of factories and rail yards hit with surgical precision. Whatever the British were flying, it was mapping the Reich with inhuman accuracy. Colonel Dietrich's team began testing fragments under pressure rigs. The wooden laminates resisted until the machines cracked first. "Impossible," one technician muttered. "The glue holds stronger than the grain." At the same time, German radar operators began noticing a new anomaly. The unknown intruders reflected only a fraction of the signal strength expected from an aircraft. Some speculated that the British had discovered a method to absorb radio waves. Others believed it was divine punishment for arrogance, God's own angels flying wooden wings. By midsummer, the term wooden shadow had replaced ghost in internal communiques. Across the channel, in a quiet suburb of Hertfordshire, a very different kind of war was being fought. Inside the de Havilland workshops, the smell of glue and sawdust replaced that of oil and steel. Rows of carpenters, many drawn from the furniture trade, shaped thin sheets of birch over molds, their hands moving with the precision of violin makers. Engineers in white coats walked among them, measuring tolerances with calipers no thicker than a fingernail. Geoffrey de Havilland, the founder's son, inspected each fuselage half before the two shells were bonded together around a Merlin engine. His philosophy was simple: speed as armor. If you could outrun the bullet, you didn't need to stop it. The Mosquito's smooth wooden skin created almost no turbulence. It sliced through the air instead of punching it. Without heavy armor or turrets, it weighed nearly half of a conventional bomber, yet carried the same load. In test flights, it reached 415 miles per hour, faster than any German interceptor then in service. Every part of its design defied wartime logic. While others built heavier, the British built smarter, using materials no one thought worthy of combat. One engineer later wrote that working on the Mosquito felt more like building a musical instrument than a weapon. They varnished the wood until it shone like polished mahogany. The glue casein mixed with synthetic resin formed a bond invisible to the eye, but stronger than metal rivets. The plane was beautiful, silent, and terrifyingly efficient. When the first production batch rolled out in late 1942, pilots joked that it looked too elegant to kill. Within months, it was killing plenty without ever being seen. German interceptors soon learned that even when they caught sight of one, they could never keep pace. The Mosquito climbed like a hawk and dived like a falling star. Radar could barely detect it. Ground controllers cursed at their screens as the thin blips vanished beyond range. Fighter ace Heinz Struning reported, after one chase, it was like trying to shoot a reflection in water. By autumn, frustration turned to dread. The British began using special Mosquito units, the Pathfinders, to guide massive bomber formations to their targets. German officers noticed that when these wooden shadows appeared, destruction followed with uncanny precision. No one understood how a nation under siege with rationed aluminum and nightly raids could produce such perfection. Yet they did, and each new sortie carved another wound into the Reich's belief in technical supremacy. The wooden plane that engineers had once mocked as a curiosity had become a symbol of something more dangerous than power imagination. It proved that innovation could thrive amid scarcity, that speed could protect better than armor, that craftsmanship could outwit mass production. While German scientists obsessed over heavier engines and thicker armor plating, British carpenters were building ghosts that flew faster than fear itself. At RAF Whiten on a gray February morning in 1943, the fog hung low over the runway, and the smell of wet grass mixed with fuel. The men of the Pathfinder force were already awake, walking toward their mosquitoes, parked like restless birds in the mist. There was no swagger here, no loud laughter. These were not the heavy bomber crews of Lancaster squadrons who carried the weight of cities in their bellies. The Pathfinder pilots carried something far smaller yet far more important light, the light that would guide thousands of bombs through the dark. The idea had begun with one man, Air Vice Marshal Don Bennett, an Australian mathematician turned aviator who believed accuracy was not luck but arithmetic. He convinced Bomber Command that chaos could be tamed by calculation. His Pathfinders would fly ahead of the bomber stream, mark the exact target, and vanish before the main force arrived. It sounded simple on paper. In practice, it demanded perfection under fire. Only the Mosquito, fast and nimble enough to escape pursuit, could do it. Inside its narrow cockpit, the Mosquito Pathfinder was a machine built around human intelligence. Each dial, each lever existed to translate mathematics into survival. The pilot and navigator worked as one. Between them stood a small gray box called the oboe receiver, connected to a network of ground transmitters across southern England. The system worked on timing precise radio pulses bouncing between aircraft and base. By measuring fractions of a second, the ground station could determine the Mosquito's position with uncanny accuracy, guiding it along a curved path invisible in the sky. When the aircraft reached the exact distance to the target, the signal changed pitch. The navigator pressed a switch. The flare bomb dropped, igniting a crimson marker over the enemy city. Minutes later, hundreds of bombers would steer toward that light. The heart of the process was timing. Every tenth of a second mattered. To maintain synchronization, British engineers built atomic clock precision into mechanical circuits. They used quartz oscillators and vacuum tubes tuned to 1 part in a million. The technology was so secret that even most pilots never knew exactly how it worked. They only knew that if they followed the tone in their headphones, steady hum, rising hum, high-pitched whistle, they would be in the right place at the right second. In the nose compartment, another marvel awaited the Mixmaster bomb sight, a device of brass gears and glass scales that turned trigonometry into instinct. As the Mosquito approached its release point, the navigator fed wind speed, altitude, and course into the sight. Tiny cams, spun gears whirred, and a set of crosshairs moved across the lens, predicting where gravity and motion would meet. To an observer, it looked like a clock. To those who understood it, it was the most complex analog computer ever built. While Germany's scientists poured resources into monstrous V-weapons and guided missiles still years from deployment, Britain's mathematicians had already turned the sky into a network. Every Pathfinder aircraft was a node, every signal a calculation. The men inside these wooden shells were not just pilots, they were part of a living equation. That February night, Don Bennett briefed his crews for a raid over Cologne. His voice was calm, deliberate, as if reading a weather report. Gentlemen, tonight's success will depend not on courage, but on seconds. Every second you hold your course, the bombers behind you will save 10 lives. The crews nodded silently, scribbling numbers on maps. For them, bravery was measured not in shouts, but in decimals. When they took off, the Mosquitoes climbed into a storm of flak. At 22,000 feet, bursts of orange flared around them, but the aircraft hardly shuddered. Their engines purred evenly, the smooth wooden fuselage absorbing shock. In the cockpit, the navigator adjusted the oboe frequency. The hum in his headphones changed pitch, the signal from England tracking him across the dark channel. "Steady, we're on the curve," he said quietly. The pilot focused on the faint glow of the instrument's hand, steady on the controls. At precisely 0123, the oboe tone rose to a high note. "Now," the navigator said. The bomb bay doors opened. A single target marker fell spinning, and a second later Cologne lit up as if a red star had been nailed to its heart. Back in England, radar screens recorded the blip's final moment before it vanished into jamming noise. Then came the heavy droning of the main bomber's stream, hundreds of Lancasters following the tiny crimson dot left by that one wooden aircraft. From 20,000 feet above the city, the difference between chaos and precision was a single circle of light. By dawn, when the Pathfinders returned to base, their reports showed a revolution in accuracy. The average error radius had dropped from miles to mere hundreds of yards. Aerial photographs confirmed it. Power plants, rail yards, and bridges struck dead center. In the war rooms of London, commanders realized that the age of blind bombing was over. Don Bennett studied the photographs, quietly tracing lines with his finger. "It isn't the bombs that matter," he said. "It's knowing exactly where to put them." His engineers nodded. They had spent years turning that idea into instruments of glass and copper. The Mosquito, their unlikely vehicle, had made it real. Outside, as daylight burned away, the fog mechanics wiped frost from the wings of returning aircraft. The wooden surfaces gleamed faintly in the sun, the same wood carpenters had shaped in sheds and piano shops months before. Now those wings carried the precision of a nation. Every nail, every gear, every note of the oboe's hum represented a calculation made by ordinary people determined to make science their defense. In Berlin, the Luftwaffe's Night Fighter Command studied the same photographs and saw something else: terror. They could not understand how a handful of small, unarmored planes could paint targets so perfectly while dodging every interceptor sent after them. They only knew that wherever the red markers appeared, the next night would bring fire. That was the real power of the Mosquito. Not its speed nor its stealth, but its mind, the human and mechanical intelligence fused together in that tiny wooden frame. It was a weapon of reason, a flying equation that turned math into survival. And as the Pathfinders prepared for their next mission, the war had quietly entered a new era, one defined not by who built the biggest machines, but by who understood them best. By 1944, the British no longer relied on luck. The days of blind raids, guided only by moonlight, were over. Precision had become the new weapon, and mathematics was its ammunition. From a network of airfields stretching across southern England, small Mosquito Pathfinders took to the night sky, each one part of a vast invisible machine linking radar radio waves and human intuition into a single system of calculation. The oboe navigation network was the foundation. On a map, it looked like nothing more than two arcs drawn across Europe, but in practice it was an orchestra of signals. At ground stations, codenamed cat and mouse operators synchronized transmitters down to millionths of a second. A Mosquito flying at 25,000 feet was the conductor's baton, tracing the curve of an invisible circle. If the returning radio pulse arrived too early, the tone in the pilot's headset fell to a low hum. He was inside the circle. Too late, the tone rose outside the circle. The perfect note, the pure, steady tone, meant the aircraft was exactly where it needed to be. In that instant, one press of a button could mark a target 250 miles away with astonishing accuracy. It was a triumph of geometry, distance, and timing. The entire operation depended on faith in numbers. Each oboe pulse traveled at 186,000 miles per second. Even an error of 1,000th of a second meant a miss of hundreds of yards. To make it work, British engineers invented new vacuum tube oscillators stable enough to hold frequency through cold heat and vibration. The Mosquito was the only aircraft nimble enough to maintain the required precision in flight. The Germans tried to jam the signals, flooding the airwaves with noise, but they never understood that the real key wasn't the frequency, it was the math. British computers, primitive yet brilliant, could filter the interference by comparing multiple harmonic tones. Inside the Mosquito, the navigator's eyes never left the tiny cathode ray tube showing two dancing lines of light. When they overlapped perfectly, he gave the signal. The bomb bay opened. A single target indicator fell through darkness, burning green or red to tell the main force which point on Earth would disappear next. But the oboe was only the beginning. Alongside it, another device called H2S transformed the floor of the cockpit into a glowing map. It was the world's first airborne radar for ground mapping. The rotating beam sent pulses downward, painting rivers, coastlines, and city outlines as ghostly patterns of light. For the first time, a crew could see through cloud, through smoke, even through the night itself. The war had entered the age of electronic sight. On the evening of May 19, 1944, one of Don Bennett's squadrons prepared for a mission to the railway yards at Le Mans. The briefing room smelled of cigarettes and chalk. Bennett traced a curved line on the map with his pointer. "You'll be flying the outer arc," he said. 25,000 feet, course 143, maintain signal tone until the needle crosses zero. Drop at 23:22 hours precisely. The main force will be overhead 2 minutes later. The pilots nodded, memorizing the pattern. There were no arguments, no questions. They trusted the instruments more than instinct. At 22:50, engines roared to life. The first Mosquito lifted into a sky thick with rain. Inside, the navigator tuned the oboe receiver. The tone stabilized, soft, even perfect. They were on the curve. "Keep her steady," he said, voice calm despite the thunder of flak far below. The pilot watched the luminous green line drift across the oscilloscope, adjusting course by a single degree. Every correction, every breath had to be exact. At the same moment, in a control room in southern England, a female operator monitored the returning pulse on her own screen. Her finger hovered over a stopwatch. "Mark, mark, mark," she whispered into her headset, tracking the heartbeat of a plane she would never see. When the echo aligned precisely with her timing grid, she pressed a switch that sent the command signal back across the channel. The Mosquito's receiver beeped once. The navigator pressed the release. From 25,000 feet, the bomb fell silently, tumbling through cloud. A second later, the flare ignited, painting the sky with crimson fire. In London's operations room, the plotting board updated automatically, showing the new beacon position. Then, like clockwork, the main bomber force appeared, hundreds of Lancasters and Halifaxes, following that single point of light through the storm. Photographs taken later showed the result: rail lines severed, fuel tanks shattered, repair yards burning in clean circles of destruction. The aiming error was less than 300 yards. For the Pathfinders, this was no miracle. It was mathematics made visible. They had turned time, radio, and geometry into a weapon so precise that it made steel and armor irrelevant. Every successful mission proved that intellect could shape the battlefield as surely as firepower. In Berlin, the reports infuriated Luftwaffe command. Interrogations of captured British airmen revealed nothing. Most Pathfinders knew only that they followed tones and lights. German scientists dissected captured equipment but couldn't replicate it. The secret lay in the synchronization between aircraft and ground, something their communications network couldn't achieve under bombing raids. The more they tried to jam or mimic the oboe signal, the more their own radar stations were blinded by the interference. By midsummer, the Reich's night defenses were collapsing under a war fought with numbers. One German commander called it a battle we cannot see. Even as he wrote the report, more mosquitoes were in the air, drawing invisible circles over Germany's heart. Precision had become the Allies' most terrifying advantage. It allowed them to strike factories without leveling entire cities, to destroy bridges without touching the towns beside them. It was warfare stripped of guesswork, a symphony of mathematics and machinery. And yet, within that cold perfection, there was still humanity. The Pathfinders knew that every flare they dropped meant hundreds of men behind them would live or die by its accuracy. When they returned from missions, they rarely spoke. They simply marked the map for the next flight and cleaned the glass of their instruments. They were scientists in flight suits executing the quietest revolution of the war. Their success would eventually lead to overconfidence and to one mission where luck finally failed them. The night they were shot down near Kassel, the Germans would finally get their wish, a captured Mosquito Pathfinder intact enough to study. What they found inside would force even the proudest engineers to question everything they believed about modern warfare. On the night of August 12, 1944, over the burning industrial city of Kassel, a German radar operator saw the impossible, a mosquito that had stayed too long. For months, the British wooden bombers had come and gone like ghosts, their radar signature faint, their flight paths erratic, their timing perfect. But this one lingered, circling the target area to verify its marker flares. Anti-aircraft batteries locked on. A flak burst bloomed directly in its path, and a streak of orange ripped through the black sky. A second later, 2 engines flamed out, and the ghost became mortal. Witnesses in nearby villages saw it descend almost gracefully, gliding in silence until the left wing clipped a row of pine trees and tore away. The fuselage hit the ground, sliding across a field and coming to rest against a hedgerow. When the first German patrol reached the wreckage, they expected ashes. Instead, they found something eerily intact, a wooden hull still warm, its varnished skin glimmering under the moonlight smoke rising through the cracks like breath from a dying animal. At dawn, Colonel Dietrich's men from the Luftwaffe Technical Command arrived with a flatbed truck. They had been chasing rumors of this aircraft for 2 years. The wooden shadow, the furniture bomber, the phantom that could not be hit. Now, for the first time, they had one almost whole. The colonel circled the wreck, running his hand over the splintered fuselage. "So this is the machine that humiliated our night fighters," he murmured, "made of plywood and glue." He ordered the pieces loaded carefully for transport to Rechlin, the Luftwaffe's top-secret testing facility. 3 days later, inside hangar, 3 engineers laid the mosquito's remains on trestles under bright floodlights. The wooden surface gleamed like marble. They expected crude carpentry, but what they saw was precision. Thin layers of birch and balsa sandwiched together in perfect symmetry. When they cut into the material, it did not flake or splinter. It flexed slightly, then sealed against itself as if alive. Tests showed the composite resisted both moisture and temperature far better than aluminum. One engineer whispered, "This isn't furniture, this is chemistry." They found the oboe receiver behind the navigator's seat, a maze of wires and glowing valves. Each component was labeled with neat English script: cathode delay line, phase inverter, pulse selector. No one in the room could fully explain how it worked. The colonel called for the electronics division. Within hours, specialists from Telefunken arrived bringing oscilloscopes and notebooks. They traced the circuits, muttering about synchronized pulses, fractional timing, radio triangulation. One of them finally looked up and said, "They've turned the sky into a calculator." Next, they examined the bomb site. It was the most complex mechanical device any of them had ever seen. A gleaming brass and glass instrument the size of a human head, its gears meshed so tightly that the movement was almost silent. They connected a small power supply and the dials came to life, the crosshairs moving smoothly as the device calculated angle speed and wind drift. A young technician stared, mesmerized. "It thinks," he said quietly. "You feed it numbers and it answers." The Mosquito's cockpit told the same story. Instruments were arranged with surgical logic. Switches were color-coded gauges labeled with clarity that bordered on elegance. Even the seat harness buckles were ergonomically designed. A British pilot could fly this aircraft by instinct, every movement flowing like a reflex. To German engineers accustomed to complexity and over-design, this simplicity was unnerving. Over the next weeks, they tested the fragments in laboratories. The wooden laminate outperformed expectations. Its tensile strength rivaled light alloys, and its flexibility absorbed shock better than any metal frame. The synthetic glue of phenolic resin bonded so tightly that the wood failed before the adhesive did. "Stronger than steel at half the weight," read one of the astonished reports. Colonel Dietrich sent a memorandum to Berlin summarizing his findings. "Enemy has achieved remarkable efficiency through unconventional materials. Construction methods decentralized, likely produced in multiple small factories. Airframe performance estimated at 650 kilometers per H, higher than me, 410, despite lower power. Recommend immediate study of composite manufacturing." When the report reached Luftwaffe High Command, it was met with disbelief. Some officers dismissed it as exaggeration or propaganda. "Glue and wood cannot defeat steel," one general scoffed. But the numbers were irrefutable. The Mosquito's glide ratio acceleration and turning radius were all superior. More alarming were the results of radar testing. Mounted on a pylon and illuminated by high-frequency beams, the captured aircraft produced barely half the reflection of a conventional bomber. Its wooden skin absorbed radio waves, reducing visibility to radar operators by as much as 60%. In an era when radar ruled the skies, this was heresy. By September, the engineers had stripped every wire, every bolt, every plank. On a chalkboard, they listed their conclusions: advanced adhesives, aerodynamic perfection, electronic navigation beyond current German capability. The wooden plane they had ridiculed turned out to be a flying equation of physics and ingenuity. Colonel Dietrich closed the final report with a single sentence that revealed more humility than any speech could. "The British fight us not with armor but with intellect, and intellect weighs nothing." The wrecked Mosquito was eventually burned during an air raid on Rechlin, its remains scattered among the ruins. But those who had seen it never forgot the shock. For the first time, German engineers confronted a truth they could no longer deny. The war was no longer a contest of materials, but of minds. By the spring of 1945, the airfields at Rechlin were silent. Hangars that had once hummed with engines and testing rigs now echoed only with the wind. The technicians who had studied the captured Mosquito were gone, some drafted into last-ditch infantry units, others lost in bombings that erased entire departments in a single night. Colonel Dietrich remained walking each morning through the rubble of Hangar 3, where the wooden aircraft had once rested on trestles. The war had reduced everything around him to twisted steel and ash, yet in his mind he still saw that smooth, wooden fuselage gleaming under the lamps, lighter and stronger than logic allowed. He opened a charred drawer in his office and found the final report again, the one he had never dared send to headquarters after Berlin fell. The first page bore a single line of handwriting in fading pencil, stronger than steel at half the weight. Beneath it were the calculations his men had made: compressive strength, radar absorption, heat tolerance. He traced the numbers with a trembling finger and felt the absurdity of it all. They had worshipped numbers, yet never understood imagination. Outside, Soviet artillery thundered on the horizon. Every explosion shook dust from the rafters. Dietrich sat at his desk and wrote, in the margin of the old report, "We mocked the wooden plane. We forgot that wood bends steel brakes." He closed his eyes and remembered the young technician who had whispered, "It thinks," while watching the Mosquito's bomb site come alive. That same boy was probably dead now, lost somewhere in the ruins of Berlin. What had all their genius achieved? Engines that overheated, prototypes that never flew, aircraft too heavy to lift their own ambition. In those last weeks, the Luftwaffe's laboratories were stripped bare. Machines were dismantled, documents burned, blueprints stuffed into suitcases for escape. The dream of German superiority dissolved in the smoke of its own arrogance. Yet among the scientists who survived, a quiet realization spread, one that had nothing to do with ideology or pride. They had been defeated not by larger armies or better medals, but by people who dared to be illogical. The British had looked at scarcity and seen opportunity. Where Germany saw shortage of aluminum, they saw abundance of timber. Where the Reich demanded perfection, the Allies practiced improvisation. Dietrich began keeping a diary during those final days. The entries were short, written in the tone of a man speaking to himself. April 10th, they told us knowledge was obedience. It was fear. April 16th, the Mosquito was made by craftsmen, not soldiers. Perhaps that is why it flew so freely. April 20th, we built for eternity. They built for flight. He wrote until his hands ached, until the sound of shells grew nearer, until he could no longer ignore the truth that had haunted him since the night he touched the Mosquito's skin. When the Soviets finally reached Rechlin, they found him sitting among stacks of papers and fragments of charred wood. They assumed he was another officer awaiting capture. They did not know that in his coat pocket he carried a small sliver of the Mosquito's fuselage, polished smooth between his fingers over countless nights. He handed it to a young Russian interpreter and said simply, "Keep it. It's proof that genius can come from humility." The soldier nodded, not understanding, and placed it in his bag. Months later, when the war was over, surviving German engineers were interrogated by Allied teams. Many spoke of jets, rockets, and radar, eager to prove their value to the victors. Only a few mentioned the Mosquito. They described it with an almost reverent tone, calling it the perfect aircraft. One engineer admitted, "We studied it to learn how to make better machines, but we ended up learning something about people." In a small notebook recovered from Rechlin years after the war, another entry appeared in faint blue ink. If the war had lasted longer, perhaps we would have learned to think as they did, to build light, to move fast, to trust imagination. But by then it was too late. We had forgotten that invention is not about power. It is about purpose. As Europe rebuilt, Dietrich's generation faded into quiet anonymity. Factories rose where hangars had burned. The world turned its eyes toward jet engines and atomic-age dreams. Yet, somewhere in a museum case in London, a single Mosquito hung suspended from the ceiling, its varnished wings glowing under the lights. Visitors saw beauty. Engineers saw genius. And for those who once believed that only steel could win wars, the sight of that wooden aircraft remained a silent confession carved into history. When the war finally ended, Europe awoke to a silence that seemed almost unnatural. The roar of engines, the whistle of bombs, the endless hum of factories all faded into wind and birdsong. In that quiet, the legacy of the Mosquito began to take shape, not as a weapon of destruction, but as a monument to imagination. Across airfields now littered with rusting wrecks of steel, one sleek wooden aircraft still gleamed beneath the dust, its varnished skin reflecting sunlight like calm water. Mechanics who had once patched bullet holes in aluminum now stood around it in silence, wondering how something so light could have survived the weight of war. In the years that followed, the Mosquito became the blueprint for a new kind of thinking. Its aerodynamic perfection and composite construction inspired the next generation of aircraft designers. The Americans studied its wooden frame to develop bonded metal skins for the jet age. The British adapted its electronics to create the first true reconnaissance cameras used in the Cold War. Even the engineers who had once fought against it, now working under new governments or in distant research labs, admitted privately that the Mosquito had changed everything. It had proved that speed, flexibility, and imagination were worth more than brute force. At de Havilland, the men and women who had built the Mosquito returned to civilian life. Many went back to the same furniture shops and piano factories where it all began. The tools they had used to shape wings now carved tables, again, the same glue that once held fuselages, now bonding polished cabinets. But they carried something invisible home with them, a quiet pride that craftsmanship had helped win a world war. To them, the Mosquito wasn't just an aircraft. It was proof that ordinary hands, guided by reason and purpose, could defy the impossible. In museums today, visitors walk beneath its wings without realizing what they're seeing. They see a relic, not a revolution. Yet, to those who understand, every line of the Mosquito's silhouette tells a story of scientists who turned radio waves into geometry, of carpenters who built precision from wood, of pilots who trusted mathematics more than armor. It stands as the most unlikely miracle of the war. A ghost that defeated giants. Among the old archives of the Luftwaffe's technical branch, historians later found a single surviving page from Colonel Dietrich's notes. The handwriting was faded, but the words remained legible. We were blinded by strength and humbled by a shadow. In the end, the enemy we feared most was not their machines, but their minds. That sentence outlived him. It outlived the war. It remains the most honest epitaph ever written for an age of arrogance. And now, decades later, the Mosquito still flies at air shows, its twin Merlin engines singing a note too pure for nostalgia. When it lifts off, spectators fall silent. It climbs lightly into the sky, as if reminding everyone below that greatness was once built from wood and glue and from the courage to think differently. If this story moved you, let it live on. Comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Was your family connected to the war or to the machines that defined it? Every story, every memory keeps history breathing. Subscribe to the channel, share this video, and help us keep these forgotten stories alive, because history is not just about who fought, but who dared to imagine.